On the Fringe with Dan RadioStyle. Hope everybody out there is having themselves a great day. There is a lot going on, folks. First off, today, it's Thursday, 12/10, and today at 3 o'clock Eastern Time, the 4 states that are involved in the lawsuit from Texas are supposed to respond. I've got some great information around that. Also got some very interesting information that I'm going to bring to our attention. I don't know exactly where this goes, how this plays out, but it does seem like we are preparing ourselves for some sort of confrontation. I don't know. There's a lot of information that's gone into this. We're going to get right into it right now. So first and foremost, Sidney Powell, and this is just kind of an example of many places where we're seeing these lawsuits be kicked back and then they try again and whatever. I want to say one thing I kind of want to try to put some perspective around this. What Sidney Powell is doing is great, and she's trying to legally help out the Trump campaign state by state. But what's not really mentioned, and what I think is part of this, is she's pulling together a lot of information that is being used by the Texas state suing, right? So I think all of these things tie together, and just because one state says, no, we're not going to, our Supreme Court's not going to see this, that's fine. That's really not a problem. Just kind of try to keep that in mind, because we are going to, of course, hear a little bit more about that, I think, today, tomorrow, and maybe into next week. We'll see how things play out. But this individual, Vox Day, I'm not really sure, obviously that's not his probably real name, but needless to say, he's got some very interesting thoughts around how these types of cases go. Now, these individual cases, like Sidney Powell, don't usually go well, but the big case, the Texas case, but there's one big exception to this SCOTUS appellate role. The Supreme Court is the court of original jurisdiction for disputes between state governments. It can hear evidence and determine questions of fact. And in some current disputes, there probably won't even be much of that. Few, if any, of the facts that the plaintiffs will rely upon are going to be seriously disputed, and the substance of the case will resolve around the application of those facts to the election framework set out in the Constitution. So not only is this a case that the Supreme Court is almost required to hear, it's going to be about the interpretation of very clear, straightforward clauses of the Constitution and their application to the present circumstance. It is an originalist legal wet dream, truly. We've got a number of people on that Supreme Court right now that are going to make sure this gets heard correctly, and we will see how things play out. But this is exactly what the Supreme Court is for. So one thing that's important, and this was one of the things he was also pointing out, that if it was just the original Texas only, or even just the original 7 states that signed on, they may have had a harder time getting this in front of the Supreme Court. But I think as of now, we're looking at 20 states that have signed on to this. 20 states. That's a huge chunk of the republic. The Supreme Court has to see this. And with that many states questioning the same thing, it gives it an insane amount of power. Now, it does seem reminiscent to what happened in the Civil War, and this cracks me up. This is CNN. This is the deep state in action. It, to me, is hilarious because it is so obvious what they do. They project, they project, they project. So whenever they are saying something is the case, I look at it and go, okay, so it's basically the opposite. Here's a perfect example. They are trying to put Trump as the equivalent of the slave states during the Civil War. Now, just to do a quick little history lesson, the southern slave states were actually the Democratic Party. The Democrat Party was the party of slavery, was the party of the slaves, was the party that did not want to give black people freedom from slavery. In fact, 100% of the Southern people voted against that. So if anything, kind of seems like Trump right now is trying to be a little bit more like Lincoln than the other way around. And again, whenever they point a finger, whenever the deep state's like, yeah, he's being like the Southern states, it's like, all right, so you guys are being like the Southern states again, and Trump is basically like Lincoln, and here we are. It's like the Civil War all over again, except this time, hopefully, no need for bloodshed. We'll see, though. There's some crazy stuff brewing around the world. Now, just something because I wanted to cover this, and it's only like 10 seconds of video that we really need to watch. But the SpaceX Starship during a test flight. And Elon Musk said, hey, we learned some stuff, so no big deal, success, woohoo. But this success ended up in a big giant ball of flames. Let's check out 10 seconds here. And boom, there she goes. Yep. So SpaceX is still working on it. Thank God there was nobody in there. Nobody really got injured that I know of. I don't think anybody got injured at all. So again, this is part of building billion-dollar aircraft, part of building spaceships. It's not easy. Stuff happens. Lives were lost even during the Mercury program and all sorts of things. So again, this is part of what happens, but it's very interesting, and I thought I'd share. Newsmax finally beat Fox. Now, primarily, I think, in one demographic so far, and I think it was against Martha McCallum, which is great, because Martha's one of the people that was quoted saying, we already called the election, when she was talking to Trey. It was a kind of a famous video that was going around a while ago. So, not unhappy to see her, because she is a very deep state, a very attractive deep state lady, don't get me wrong, but she's deep state nonetheless. So, it is kind of nice to see that the Kelly guy, this Jim Kelly, I forget his last name, but he, there it is, Greg Kelly, thank you. Showed 229,000 was where he got the 25 to 54, right? He had 229,000 people from that age bracket, while McCallum's show only had 203,000. So again, good job, Greg Kelly. Been watching him and that Stitchfield guy. Those guys are both really, really good. And again, been watching a lot of Newsmax lately and actually enjoying it. I literally I'm probably like 3 weeks now without watching any Fox News, and it's been surprisingly cool. I used to get grumpy and angry when I was watching them just after the election, literally depressed, grumpy, and angry. And I am so happy I turned away from them. No matter what happens or how this plays out, it has just been better for my soul to not have to deal with that negativity anymore. So it's been very, very nice. Now, I want to start getting into the true nuts and bolts of what I think is really going on. Now, obviously, the election is a component of this, and dealing with the legal stuff. Again, we're supposed to hear 3 o'clock Eastern time today. We're supposed to hear from the 4 states. They're supposed to respond to the Supreme Court. We'll see how that plays out, and I'll certainly talk about that tomorrow. But then the Washington Examiner starts to paint a picture, and we've been seeing a lot of stuff come out as of late that suggests China is a lot more involved in our affairs. China is much more headstrong in trying to take over this country and possibly larger swaths of the planet. It is becoming very apparent that China is probably enemy number one. Like we've been saying Russia, Russia, Russia forever. Russia's economy is teeny tiny. It's like 1.9 trillion as of like 2018 or something like that. China was 14 trillion and the United States is 20 trillion. China is the biggest threat to the United States. And there's some suspicions that maybe there's some preparation being taken place. Now, I don't know about necessarily a direct attack from China. First off, they don't have aircraft and the ability to move massive quantities of troops in a quick amount of time. So it would have to kind of play out a little differently. And there is some theories as to around what's going on. And we will get into some of that. But right now, the nation's spy chief said that the Chinese Communist Party is conducting a massive influence campaign aimed at dozens of members of Congress and their staffs in an effort involving attempted blackmail and bribery. Now, when John Ratcliffe, comes out and says this, now he can't go into specifics, he can't name out all the people, but what he is essentially doing is telling the deep state, look, we know which one of you all are part of this. We know why some of the Republicans are trying to keep Trump from getting back into office. We understand why most of the Democrats are trying to keep Trump out of office. We get it. We see the people. So John Ratcliffe is basically putting out a little message to everybody saying, we know what's going on. We have a foreign power influencing our governments. That is treason. That is against the law. That's against the Constitution. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. That's not okay to have another country trying to exert its influence within our own circles. We've been blaming Russia for doing that to Trump for 4 years now. I say we, it's like I'm part of this crazy country. But we have been blaming him and never been able to get it to stick and ignoring the 800-pound gorilla in the room. We're ignoring the giant monster that has been stealing technology, stealing intellectual property. They've not just been doing it to us, they've been doing it to Russia and other countries. China is the bully. China goes around and forces its way into countries with some money and yada yada, and then instantly starts to try to control everything they do. That's what communism is, right? It's a socialistic regime with central planning and control, and generally a dictator is involved, but it's right. I mean, I'm not an expert in all the different kinds of economics, but certainly not too far off from the general of it. So what we're starting to hear, again, China's involved. We know they are. Ratcliffe's saying, hey, we know exactly who you are in members of Congress and who all those people are, that we're paying attention to you. We're watching what you do right now. And so one of the things that's been very interesting, Newsom and Kemp, both, and they're saying committed treason. This is Mike Adams again. But again, I agree with what he's saying here. He likes to use a little bit flagrant words. I think that's probably why he initially got kicked off of YouTube eons ago. And I think he created that Brighteon or whatever that was. Anyway, Newsom, Kemp both committed treason by colluding with the communist China in COVID-19 face mask money laundering scheme. I don't know if you guys have heard about this. This has been out for a while. Gavin Newsom's story certainly was out. Said something like $400 million, or was it billion? $400 billion, sorry. But anyway, under the guise of fighting pandemic, California Gavin Newsom and Georgia Governor Brian Kemp pretended to purchase face masks and other Wuhan coronavirus supplies from communist China in a massive money laundering and bribery scheme, the full details of which are still unfolding. Now, a lot of people are suspecting that maybe this was some sort of laundering. Maybe some of the money went to China and then came back into their accounts, Newsom and Kemp. And Kemp's a Republican, again, Georgia's governor, right? So we've got some dirty laundry that needs to be aired on both sides. We've got Ratcliffe talking about how he knows people in China are trying to directly influence people. We heard the story about that Fang lady, was it Michelle Fang or whatever her name was, that was spying on people here in the Northern California, and also had a couple intimate relationships with a couple mayors or governors out in the Midwest. So China's been doing their darndest to influence the way this government, this country, works. Now, starting to get into what I think some of the crazy is happening, or what we're potentially preparing for. There's a discussion, and it's going to be in one of these articles coming up here shortly, that the UN may be asked to stop this whole thing with Trump if he at some point maybe wins this case with Texas, and then sort of basically ends up winning control of the government because of the vote going back to Congress, and then Congress deciding the legislatures what their one vote's going to be. And if that's the case, there's a rumor, and it's just a rumor, so I'm just bringing it to people's attention because a lot of times by putting things in the public light, it almost keeps it from happening because now people are aware of it, right? So it's one of those places where I'm hoping I'm wrong. I'm hoping this is just a rumor. But they're saying that maybe our government, our democratic people, probably sponsored by California, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, New York, right? A couple of these very, very heavy left-leaning states are going to ask the UN to step in and do something about this. Now, this is kind of the theory that's being floated around right now, and we've got some interesting circumstantial evidence to offer some credit, or at least offer some evidence that we're trying to keep certain things from happening. Example, Canada and China were supposed to have military training, snow type, like cold weather exercises. China was going to send a bunch of soldiers over to Canada roughly around now so they could do some training. Now, there is some precedent for this, by the way. Canada was in China doing the same thing, I think back in 2018. So it's not totally crazy that the Chinese were going to come over here and do this training, but it seems, I'm guessing, that the United States probably had a little chit-chat with China and said, based off the intelligence we've got and what we're seeing, I don't think we feel really good about having Chinese soldiers on our northern border. So this got canceled. I don't know if it's because of that reason, but this got canceled. That I do know. Why? Speculating maybe. Now, something else that's been talked about, and again, this is tying together. John Kerry, someone that's been a very big proponent of this infamous Great Reset. I don't know if you guys have heard about this Great Reset, but apparently in June, elites at an important international institution such as the World Economic Forum and the United Nations, they both launched a far-reaching campaign to, quote, reset the global economy. The plan involves dramatically increasing the power of government through expansive new social programs like the Green New Deal and using vast regulatory schemes and government programs to coerce corporations into supporting left-wing causes. The two justifications for the proposal, which has been aptly named by its supporters as the Great Reset, are the COVID-19 pandemic, the short-term justification, if you will, and the so-called climate crisis caused by global warming, the long-term justification. So according to the Great Reset supporters, the plan would fundamentally transform much of society. Sound like communism, maybe? I wonder who's behind it. As World Economic Forum, WEF, head Klaus Schwab wrote back in June, the world must act jointly and swiftly to revamp all aspects of our societies and economies, from education to social contracts and working conditions. From education to social contracts and working conditions. China, the ones with slave labor, these are the people that are behind this. So every country, they continue, from the United States to China, must participate, and every industry, from oil and gas to tech, must be transformed. In short, we need a great reset of capitalism. Capitalism has proven to work rather well. Now, is it wrought with issues as far as greed and corruption from that standpoint? Yeah, you get a lot of money. That definitely is part of it, and we need to figure out ways to do that better. But every example of socialism that's truly existed has failed, and it doesn't generally take that long to fail. It's an expensive type of government that generally runs out of money and then just straps or basically it requires everybody to accept way less. And that's something that certainly Trump's not fond of. That's something I'm not fond of. I mean, the American dream's been all about getting bigger and more and growing and then developing and evolving. And, we can come up with new technologies to make things safer and all that, but to just get rid of it altogether, no. So again, this is what the push is. And Biden's not come out yet and so much admitted that he's pushing this. People around him have. John Kerry certainly has, and this is one of the slimiest guys ever. So again, there's been a lot of discussion. This is most likely the direction, almost assuredly, the direction that the left would have taken this country had they been given the opportunity to do so. Now, this is fascinating. Just all I can say is fascinating. It's scary too, I guess. I mean, I don't know. We're in the most powerful nation in the world for the most part. So I guess I'd rather be here than anywhere else. But that being said, there is a lot of interesting information right now that suggests we're preparing for some form of confrontation. So one thing that we've noticed over the past, I want to say it's 4 or 5 days at this point, but as of Saturday and then on, we've been seeing all sorts of C-17 aircraft, a number of C-130 aircraft, just large amounts of aircraft. One guy, Monkey Works is his name on YouTube, does a lot of stuff where he looks at all the flights and is just, guy knows what the hell he's talking about, that's for sure. He's a lot of fun to check him out if you like that kind of stuff. But he is talking about the amount of movement of planes, especially these types of craft, he says was like 4 times or 4x as he likes to call it, right? So it's significant amount of movement is happening. A lot of it heading out to Nellis Air Force Base. Now, for those of you that don't exactly know where Nellis is, it's right by Las Vegas. So you got Las Vegas down here. You got Nellis right above. There's all sorts of crazy stuff out here. I don't know exactly where Area 51 is, but I would assume you're, getting out here somewhere. So it is interesting where a lot of these people are coming. Not sure what technology they're wrapping their hands around, or if they're just, if probably just a great base. Nellis is probably just a great base to logistics and to bring all these people in and prepare for something that could be happening, or at least get some troops centralized, or maybe they've got underground bunkers there. I don't know. But a lot of people have been ending up, or a lot of transport craft have been ending up in Nellis Air Force Base. If you guys have any information, comment below. If you know anything, it'd be fantastic. Another thing, by the way, if you want to help my channel, like, subscribe, comment. Just even if you leave a stupid comment like, hey, this was cool, or yeah, man, I don't care. Just leave a comment, because apparently those things help a lot as far as YouTube deciding it wants to do things with my channel. All right, that being said. So, Nellis, a lot of people glowing in on Nellis. What else is going on? Well, we have naval deployments. Now, we're going to see a number of craft here. There's a lot of different aircraft carriers and battle groups and helicopter carriers and light attack like this one here. I think these have the F-35 on them now. But this is kind of the one. Let me see if I can get this a little bigger. Awesome. This map right here shows where we've got our major naval battle groups. Now, obviously, over here is the United States, for those of you that don't know how to look at a map. We've got the USS Carl Vinson up here. We've got the USS Essex over here. So we've got, the Theodore Roosevelt over there, and then the LHD, the CVN. So we got a carrier group, and we got another carrier strike group down here. We've got two major carrier groups just off the West Coast. Two major carrier groups just off the East Coast. And I believe last time I saw, it's over here by India. We've got a Nimitz carrier group over here by India. Interesting. Well, Middle East as well. We got Saudi Arabia, India, and then you got Iran, Iraq, all that stuff over there, right? Super hot spot of the world. And then over here, Ronald Reagan, one of our newer carrier groups over by Japan. We've got this another group over here and another one over here. Again, all by China, Japan, Philippines, South Korea. Like a lot of our friends are over in this area. Australia's been heavily involved in a lot of things as well. So our groups, and this is recent movements, folks. This isn't like this happened weeks and weeks ago. These are like over the last few days, we've been noticing these ships are traveling to these locations. So the word in intelligence circles, again, take that for what it's worth. Every time people say anonymous sources say, someone close to the president says, so whatever. The word in intelligence circles right now are saying that if the Supreme Court voids any or all of the November 3 election due to massive fraud and violations of the U.S. Constitution with changes to election laws, the lawless extension of voting for weeks, in violation of 3 U.S.C. 1 and 2, the Democrats are apparently planning on asking the United Nations to invade to depose Trump as a dictator. There is also word within intelligence circles that the states of California, Oregon, Washington, and New York might actually try to secede from the Union if Trump gets 4 more years, and may need to be forcefully brought back under control the same way that the renegade southern states were handled back in 1860. Does this one kind of almost make more sense to you now? They're trying to equal Trump to the southern states when it's the other way around. That's what they're doing. At least that's what they're talking about. Now, do I know this for sure? No. And this is totally speculation, and I hope this is just a rumor. Seriously. But I think it would be silly not to bring it up, because literally we've got all sorts of craft that are moving in all sorts of crazy places right now. I mean, this guy, when he wrote it this morning, according to U.S. Naval Institute, the Navy has deployed 3 aircraft carriers plus landing helicopter dock off the West Coast, 2 aircraft carriers and their strike groups, plus another LHD off the U.S. East Coast. Off the West Coast, we've got the Carl Vince, blah, 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 right? So, and they're not in port, they're saying, either. Not at port. They're up by the Oregon-Washington border and off the coast of California. And then the other one's obviously probably somewhat close to New York, right? This guy up here, probably. So, okay. This is kind of what maybe is happening. Now, here's what's also interesting. Apparently, China is positioning out in the Pacific right now. They're moving ships. They can see these things on satellites. And just this morning, and this was a couple days ago, I think, the British revealed that they have been tracking the entire Russian northern fleet off the British coast this month, as the Russians head into the North Atlantic for something. Now, do I think the British and Russia are against us? I honestly don't, but that's concerning either way. But what are we preparing for? Are we preparing maybe to get attacks from other places, or is this possibly where the deep state's going to make their efforts from? But the Royal Navy certainly is a good group of ships, and Russia's Navy is very accomplished as well as their anti-submarine and submarine abilities, their anti-missile abilities. Russia's definitely to be contended with. So one possibility is they're all heading towards the Mediterranean to deal with Syria and perhaps Turkey. Very possible. But what if they're not going to the Mediterranean? What if they're positioning out in the Atlantic to arrive as requested along the U.S. coast? I know it sounds crazy, but we're seeing history unfolding. Again, want to make sure that we're at least bringing this to people's attention. But one thing that's also worth noting is as of Wednesday, December 9th, yesterday, Lynn Wood said, good advice to keep a very close eye on everything Communist China does over the next several days and weeks. Think about that statement for a second. Do you think Lynn Wood, do you think Sidney Powell, do you think Rudy Giuliani, do you think Jenna Ellis probably are getting at least earfuls about some stuff that's heading, or at least a hint that there's more other stuff coming? You guys just keep fighting the fight you are, and we're going to worry about some of these other issues. We'll see. But it looks like a lot is going on right now, folks. So again, this is, make sure you've got supplies. We've talked all about this stuff. Make sure you've got yourself prepared for whatever eventuality could happen. And I will say, we're probably going to be seeing something go down in the next week or two. I mean, we're there. We're knocking on the door right now. Because no matter what, this all has to get resolved in a reasonably quick time per a lot of other sources. I mean, obviously, Tuesday, the 8th, Monday, whatever it was, that was one of the major dates. So a lot of people, you're not even allowed to talk about things. Obviously, the 14th is a big vote. The 18th is the end of the 45-day period for the executive order that happened. So we've got a lot coming up over the next short period of time. And depending on how the Supreme Court things plays out, 3 o'clock today, folks, 3 o'clock Eastern time, Supreme Court's supposed to get responses from the states, 4 states that are on the lawsuit, the 4 states that have enough electoral votes to make sure that neither candidate has 270 votes. That's why there's 4 states for sure, and definitely 4 states that broke their own constitution. So it should be a reasonably easy case from that standpoint. But again, we'll see who all's got the courage to do what's right versus the weakness to do what everybody wants you to do. And that's a very, very different path. We've got to stay strong. We've got to stay focused. And I wanted to thank, again, all you guys that have supported me. I've just the PayPal stuff, the donations have been outstanding. There's just some very amazing people that I can't even tell you how grateful I am for your gratitude, for your kindness, for your, it's just amazing. So thank you guys for everything you do. Remember, where we go one, we go all. It's on the Fringe with Dan RadioStyle.